Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thorne, and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Now, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you will notice a revolution. We're in a totally new set. It's not quite as good as, when they have those virtual sets on the news and not AR, is it AR? Or like
VR. That
we haven't got any of that. But what we have got is brand new cameras. These are like high definition, probably 4K. I don't know exactly. But these are like brand new cameras, brand new studio, brand new bigger TV. We've got the shelving, yeah.
It's great, this TV, because, when the aviation election results come in, we can just stand there and and say how everything's going.
What we could do is the weather, though, because weather is obviously relevant to aviation.
It's a podcast. It might be, become irrelevant pretty quickly.
Well, if there's like a hurricane on the way and that affects loads of flights, we can get you to do the weather report and you can stand up there and we'll get a map of Australia and stuff. Would you be happy to do that?
Potentially. I didn't do meteorology in uni, but...
You didn't do aviation either, did you?
That's true.
Here we are, gainfully employed.
For varying definitions of gainfully.
Anyway, so we're in the new set, new lights, 4K maybe cameras. We've got the shelving unit back. We've got
more visible as well.
More visible, yeah. We've got sit up there, stranded up there. We've got the belt there. We've got the aviators. So this is it. This is a new studio, new beginning. It's great, isn't it?
New studio, new beginning, same two idiots.
Same two idiots, yeah. On that note, did I even say hello to you?
No.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Hello, Jake. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Yeah, all right. Right, we got any shout-outs?
Yeah, long-time friend of the show, Mark over in Perth, has given us some positive feedback on the Huey Award. We are still working on getting a frame or a stand for that. But
so we got a whole new studio, but we couldn't find a frame.
But we couldn't find a picture frame.
No.
We're running a tight ship or aircraft over here. But Mark says, "Hi, Adam and Jake, love the Huey. How about the Stuck With You Award for flights leaving passengers stranded, e.g. Bali flight breaks down, not monthly, just whenever they occur. And the Hip to Be Square Award for something that your viewers, listeners vote to make it." So presumably that would be a viewer's choice award. My nomination is Qantas for, as Adam says, the ridiculously named Finnair A330 wet lease.
So is that the Stuck With You Award?
No, that's the Hip to Be Square Award.
Right.
So both of those stellar options.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we're finally getting into the real meat and potatoes of the Australian Aviation Podcast, which is Huey Lewis and the news.
Yes. We got any more shout-outs?
No more shout-outs, but I have brought in a couple of artifacts from my past.
You have indeed, from your past.
So 20 years or so ago now, I was a member of the Scouts.
Yeah, I bet you were really good at that. I could imagine you setting your mind to that and being like top of the class.
Yeah, well, I was a patrol leader for a while.
Oh, a patrol leader. Is that like a prefect of Scouts?
And no, it's like when among your troop, divided up into like smaller groups, your patrols.
Yeah.
And so we had like the Albatross Patrol and the Platypus Patrol and the Dingo Patrol, and I was the patrol leader of Albatross for a while.
How many people were in your team? Like, you were like an officer basically. How many
essentially
people? Yeah, how many people?
By the end, not a lot. We ended up having to kind of merge with another patrol. But I ended up kind of becoming the acting patrol leader of that patrol as well. So
right.
This was again ages ago.
Yeah.
I got my red cord. Which was
that?
We're going from the Aviation Podcast into the Scouts Podcast, but back in the day, I don't know what it's like now. There were basically like 3 levels of sort of badge tiers that you could get in the Scouts. There was the red ones, which was Pioneer, the blue ones, which was Explorer, and the green ones, which was Adventurer. So you got the Pioneer badge, the Adventurer badge, and the Explorer badge, and then you could do a little bit more to get the cord. Which was like a braided cord that you looped over your arm. And I had my red cord, and I was one badge away from getting my Pioneer badge and my blue cord. But that badge partially involved doing like a 24-hour hike of at least 15 kilometers or something, and I did not want to do that. So I did not get my blue cord. But on my way way to not getting my blue cord, one of the target badges that I got was the Air Activities badge, which I never ended up attaching to my uniform. And so I've been able to bring here, showing that my interest in aviation has gone back quite some time. To get the Air Activities badge, I have my old Scout logbook here, well loved. But to get the Air Activities badge at the Explorer level, you had to complete all of these requirements. So, 1, recognize by sight 8 types of aircraft and discuss in detail at least 2. Number 2, weather. Explain 3 elements of weather and the effects that they have on flight performance and takeoff and landing of an aircraft or glider. Have a knowledge of weather patterns in your geographical area and find out the difference in the terms ground speed and airspeed and how they relate to headwinds and tailwinds. Number 3, theory. Demonstrate an elementary knowledge of the principles governing the theory of flight, the use in an aircraft of an airspeed indicator, altimeter, and magnetic compass, how to read and apply the 24-hour clock and the phonetic alphabet, and the movable control surfaces of an aircraft and be able to describe their function, so rudder, elevators, ailerons, flaps, trim tab. And then there was an activity portion as well. Had to go to a Scout Air Activity Center and or aerodrome with patrol or other scouts and draw a map showing the location of hangars, control tower, runways, taxiways, tarmac, windsocks, prevailing wind direction, fuel stores, navigation aids, and emergency facilities. I don't remember.
This sounds more complicated than a flight training. That's ridiculous. And you just got a little badge.
It's even more at the Explorer at the Adventurer level, which I never got. No. But there was an Air Activities badge for each one. But this was things like. If you wanted the green badge, you had to be able to recognize by sight like 12 types of aircraft. You had to, familiarize yourself with a light aircraft, learn how to assist correctly in ground handling of an aircraft, have 2 flights in a light aircraft or a glider, or you had to, build a couple of model planes. So it was pretty full on. But this was the Scout handbook that we had back in the day. Don't know what it's like now. And, that's the Air Activities badge that I never ended up gluing onto my uniform. I don't know where my old uniform is.
Well, it is obviously up to you, and I don't want to press you into anything. I think that should sit there, pride of place on the shelving unit.
Well, I can put this here for now.
Yeah, put that there. We won't lose it.
We'll see. We'll see here. I have noticed that we have forgotten to remove this tag before flight, which was very careless of us. But that's a little glimpse into my past that I don't think anyone ever asked for.
No. I think that's really good. Right now, before we move on to news, one final shout out. He's in the room, so he might get embarrassed. Jordan the Great. Previously behind the round table.
You can tell that he's in the room because of the blinding white light that's sort of emanating towards us.
Yeah, he did this whole new studio setup. He spent days in this. He's been staying late and all this sort of stuff. So we are.
This was, of course, after the Dread Enoch coated the old studio in some kind of foul-smelling ooze.
But do you think with Dread Enoch, surely he's out of our life now because it's a different studio, it's a different place.
Well, it's the same vents, unfortunately. Yeah. So we might still have problems with the Dread Enoch.
Oh, I hope not. I thought that was the whole point of moving, like getting away from a bad person in your life, No,
it was mainly the ooze situation.
Right. Anyway, enough nonsense.
Thank you to Jordan.
Yes.
One of our fantastic producers here at Australian Aviation for setting up this amazing new studio. Yeah. And keep an eye out for other knickknacks and bric-a-brac and things like that we might add in the future. If you've got aircraft models, if you've got aircraft memorabilia or aviation memorabilia that you want to see on display here in the brand new Dread Enoch free Australian Aviation Podcast studio, reach out to us, media@australianaviation.com.au, and we can arrange to have those transported here through some manner of pneumatic tube.
Right. Let's get on to the news. What are we talking about, Garn? What's the first thing?
Well, I think part of some of the big news that came out over the last week was, of course, the Qantas AGM, which you mainly covered,
I hate when you do this. I hate when you do this. I haven't even got even a new setup. I've not even worked out how to get my laptop, right?
But that seems like a you problem.
That is a me problem. So basically, we'll start the Qantas AGM happened on Friday, which was live streamed. And to an extent, the AGM is a little bit of a formality. Obviously, there's various kind of shareholder votes. They made a couple of announcements. One, that they are sprucing up the cabins on the A330s. They're putting in
finally, some might say.
Finally, they've got these like OLED screens in front of the and some kind of like new mood lighting. And they've also they gave the date for their new Classic Plus reward seats. So the gist of this kind of change to their frequent flyer system is that these seats they cost more than the traditional ones, but there's more available. So this is giving people more choice. I think it's December the 12th, off the top of my head. I might be wrong. I've not got my laptop. The kind of the biggest thing was really, this was, I think...
December the 12th.
Yeah, December the 12th. So I think this was the second AGM for Vanessa Hudson, the CEO, and the first AGM from their new chairman, John Mullen. Top of my head, have I got that correct?
Wish I had. Yeah, that's John Mullen, yep.
Yes, thank God. And basically, he did a kind of speech in order to open the AGM. And it was actually very, very kind of good. And he said, look, we basically need to put the troubles of the last couple of years behind us. We need to move forward. We think we've learnt lessons and all that kind of stuff. At the end of his speech, he kind of paid tribute to Alan Joyce and said, if it wasn't for him and if it wasn't what he did through COVID, we may not be here. Now, there's two ways you could examine that. You could say, oh, wow, that's him kind of still giving love to Joyce. They haven't really learned their lessons, etc., etc. I personally think this was quite a classy thing to do because obviously there's going to be critics, but he still ended his speech by saying, look, ultimately tough decisions were made, but we can't just, throw these people under a bus. We can't just entirely move on, which is kind of how I saw it. But nonetheless, the significance of this was that the next week, or this week, as we record this, was the release of a book by Joe Aston, who is a reporter for the AFR, and he basically did a series of, I say exposés, but he had a series of stories about Qantas at his time at the newspaper. And after he left, which I think was about a year or so ago,
released actually today.
Released today. There you go. And basically, this was a kind of apparent deep dive into. It's called the Chairman's Lounge. It's called the Chairman's Lounge.
The Chairman's Lounge. The inside story of how Qantas sold us out.
Yeah, so basically it kind of looks at the past few years of the trouble between the troubles at Qantas. It makes a kind of series of allegations about the kind of relationships between politicians and kind of senior people at Qantas, and it's kind of saying that generally it's a kind of murky world, but he goes into a lot of depths. So, go on.
And we've had these questions being raised now about Anthony Albanese accepting upgrades on Qantas flights. This has sort of been a big kerfuffle in the media. We love a kerfuffle around here.
Love a kerfuffle or a bit of a faff.
Yep. But there's been a kerfuffle in the media over whether Anthony Albanese has correctly declared these business class upgrades that he got on Qantas and Emirates flights. If he, I think that the general sort of rules around it is, you can't solicit them. So you can't go to Qantas. If you're a politician, you can't go to Qantas and ask for an upgrade. But you can accept an upgrade if it's offered to you as long as you declare it. And Albanese said, well, yes, I did declare it. Now, there's been questions about his ex-wife, Carmel Tebbit, whether he correctly declared those. But others have pointed out that Carmel Tebbit was at the time a sitting politician, and she did declare those herself.
So you basically can't call up and be like, don't you know who I am? I want an upgrade. But if they offer it to you, then you can. I mean, the whole thing is particularly murky, and it's also a uniquely Australian issue because obviously Australia as a continent country, you need to fly around a lot. And if you are a politician, you obviously need to fly in for Canberra for the sitting week. So you have a lot more activity for your common garden MP.
And these were, I think, international services.
International services as well. But basically, you've got this situation where MPs are sort of reliant on Qantas. Qantas offer, I think it's all MPs access to the Chairman's Lounge.
Yep.
And so the problem with this, of course, is that on the surface, Qantas will say, well, we're simply, we've got these lounges, we want to do a nice thing for the MPs. But of course...
And for business leaders.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, the worry is the kind of influence here. If Qantas give people access to this lounge. And I'm sure it's a very nice lounge, but a lot of it's about the prestige of being in the club. You know, like these kind of, or like these kind of like gentlemen's clubs in London, of course. So it's about the prestige of being in there. And then the argument is they kind of have a hold over you. They have a whole, whether it's implicit or not.
There's been talk that if you're a business that has a contract with Qantas, as your sort of preferred travel airline, the execs would, or at least some of the execs would get a membership to the Chairman's Lounge, and if you later on down the line switch to Virgin, suddenly your Chairman's Lounge card doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And now this, I should say, in sort of defence of Qantas, this idea of a chairman's lounge is not in any way unique to Qantas.
And I believe Virgin also has one.
Yeah, exactly. So Virgin has a kind of equivalent, and globally most big airlines do this. But nonetheless, I think because you've got this idea, you've got so many MPs, and because you've got Australia's reliance on aviation, it kind of strengthens it a little bit. Like, to be fair to Albanese, in his eyes, he's declared everything. Everything has been declared. It's all been very transparent. He made a very good point. So it was obviously with I think there was an allegation that when he broke up from his then ex-wife, he gave a +1 to his son. Yeah. And he said, to be fair, when I broke up from my wife, I released a press release. I sent that me release. What more do you want? But nonetheless, it will raise questions as to this apparently murky world of a chairman.
Particularly with all of the questions that have been swirling about, is the government too cosy with Qantas? Has Qantas influence had anything to do with the whole Qatar Airways thing? The government has basically, and Albanese and the Transport Minister and the government has basically consistently said, we have been willing and we have been, ready to take on Qantas in the past. We have not pulled our punches as far as Qantas is concerned. And they have, of course, turned around and said, the opposition's plenty cozy with Qantas. And so it's all, as you say, Adam, a murky world, the intersection of politics and aviation.
But the problem is, in reality, the best way to end all of this debate would be to stop all free lounge access for all kind of politicians. That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen, because obviously they like the lounge access, and they would also argue as well that actually sometimes they need to have confidential conversations. They need time to be able to do these things and have these meetings, etc. So I can't see anything really changing.
In regards to the sort of business class upgrades, Adam, I have there was a tweet from someone, I don't remember who, but if you're listening to this podcast, thank you for thank you for having this tweet that I can talk about but not remember your name. But basically, someone was saying, I'd rather have politicians fly in business class than sit in economy class and do like photo ops about how close to the normal people they are.
Yeah, exactly. And also there is also the shocking hypocrisy here when all the journalists are writing their very worthy stories about how terrible it is. Journalists love a freebie more than any other profession in the world. There's no way that any of these journalists are saying it's absolutely terrible. If they were offered a membership of a Chairman's Lounge, they'd take it. They would take it. And so would I. Vanessa, if you were watching, I have no integrity at all. Get me in there. I want all the food, all the drink, the whole lot. And we just write about how great Qantas is every day. If you're watching Media Watch, I don't care. I'm hungry. All right.
Famous last words, Adam. Media Watch. Paul Barry. If you're watching, or I don't remember who's. Is it still Paul Barry?
I think it still is him.
Paul Barry. If you're watching, I would not accept a membership to the Chairman's
rubbish.
Lounge. Yeah, clear conflict.
This is the guy who last week called up Virgin and said, "Don't you know who I am?" When your flight got cancelled, you'll have a checkered record, son. Okay, welcome back. So you join us here, for those watching on the video, in our brand new set. All change, but still same rubbish format. Jake, what are we talking about now? What news?
On the subject of strange partnerships.
Tenuous, but go on.
Tenuous link.
Yeah.
We were discussing Qatar Airways just now. This is a stronger link. And, of course, this deal between Virgin and Qatar that would see Qatar take a 25% stake in Virgin. And they would be Virgin would be wet leasing Qatar planes to operate flights to Doha. It's sort of come out, and this was spotted by Analytic Flying, which is a aviation analytics blog, analysis blog, does a they know what they're talking about. They've got lots of graphs. But they've sort of picked up from the application that Virgin and Qatar put into the ACCC for this new arrangement of theirs that Virgin would become Qatar's, or that Qatar would become Virgin's exclusive sort of code share, interlining partner, what have you, on flights to Middle East, Europe, and Africa. The application says Qatar Airways will become Virgin Australia's exclusive interline codeshare and loyalty partner headquartered in the Middle East or Turkey, excluding an interline for passenger reaccommodation purposes. Virgin Australia will not codeshare on the international flights of other airlines to, from, or within the Middle East, Europe, and Africa, and will not acquire or supply any loyalty point accrual services or high-value guest services. So, for example, benefits such as lounge access to gold members and above with any airline headquartered in Africa or Europe. Virgin Australia will also become Qatar's exclusive interline codeshare and loyalty partner headquartered in Australia, although Qatar may continue its interline and loyalty arrangements with Qantas to the extent required by its One World membership, and Qatar Airways will not codeshare on the international flights of other airlines to and from Australia. And what this would mean is that Virgin's long-standing codeshare partnership with Etihad, headquartered in Abu Dhabi, would be gone. It would just be Virgin and Qatar code-sharing to the Middle East, and Etihad would be standing basically on its lonesome.
So almost to take a step back from that, I would say a lot of people have asked the question, what's in this for Qatar? Why would they go and buy a 25% stake in Virgin, which is an airline that has come out of COVID and is making money, but isn't like a major international airline? This is not necessarily a gold mine for them. So the question is, why would they do this? One of the reasons we know is potentially, if it's allowed through, this will allow Virgin Australia to wet lease Qatar aircraft to fly to Doha, and this effectively circumvents the rules in the sense that if you are an international airline, there's an allocation that the government has to approve. If you're a domestic airline, there is essentially like another set of allocations. So by taking a stake in Virgin Australia and using Qatar Airways aircraft and crew, it means it's very likely those flights are going to take place. And as we said before, it doesn't necessarily mean they're making a mockery of the rules. It's more so that it makes the rules look quite silly, you know. But nonetheless, that's one potential reason they can do it. This is a very interesting point because it's almost like this is almost about knocking out their competition. So to be very clear, Etihad flights will still obviously be allowed to fly from Abu Dhabi into Australia. But what it does mean is that the code share link with Virgin Australia is gone. And obviously that code share is a very significant incentive for a lot of people to book those flights. Now, you don't have to be an expert in geopolitics to know that there is a rivalry between Qatar and the UAE in all sorts of, areas of politics, but particularly in that Qatar is trying to build Doha up to be one of these hub airports that is a rival for Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So effectively what they've done is by doing this deal, they are huge. This is like a huge tackle on one of their biggest rivals, all within the rules and all within the laws, but nonetheless it puts Etihad into a very, very difficult position, and it really helps build Doha up as the kind of main or one of the main connective hubs that Australians will need to use if they want to sort of explore further in the world. Yeah,
Etihad basically now would be kind of squeezed between Qatar partnered with Virgin and Qantas or Emirates partnered with Qantas. And there are no, Etihad had an interline agreement with Rex domestically, which is not as big as a code share, but now Rex's domestic jet operations are gone. If Rex was still around flying domestic, it is still around, but still around flying domestic services on its 737-800s, then maybe Etihad might have been able to sort of pump Rex up a bit more. And go for a full code share with Rex and sort of stay in the game in terms of getting access into the Australian domestic market through code shares. But now that Rex is gone, that interline agreement is I'm not sure what's happened to it. Presumably, it might still be in effect for the regional services, but you definitely can't. You wouldn't be able to code share on an Etihad flight into Sydney and then a Rex service to Adelaide or wherever. So it's a real kind of pincer move, if you like, against Etihad, and it's difficult because they've got
nowhere to go. Basically.
They've got nowhere. Yeah. There is no third major airline group in Australia anymore. Rex gave it a go, but there's no more Rex domestic services. So unless some new domestic airline again comes along and has a crack, Etihad's kind of stuck in the middle.
It does make total sense. This is essentially the deal will help really establish Doha and Qatar as the main hub if you want to try further afield. So clearly, people were asking why has this happened. When you look into it, actually it does make perfect sense for Qatar to do this. What are we going to talk about next?
Well, on the subject of Rex, we spoke with the CEO of Hinterland Aviation, who sent us a very polite email last week talking about the Bitradata and the Huey. Basically,
I love the fact airline CEOs are hearing the Huey, and they're
he didn't mention the Huey, but
he would have known it.
It probably would have known about it. But the CEO Andrew Clare of Hinterland Aviation. Sent us a very polite email saying, look, we saw the story about the Bitradata and saying that Qantas was the most on-time airline. Actually, we were the most on-time airline based on the Bitradata. And this is true. If you look at the Bitradata as was released, yes, Hinterland was on top. With these stories, and I want to give a bit of a clarification here, with these stories, we focus mainly on the major airlines. Yeah. And when Rex and Bonza were still doing domestic services, we included them as well because they were doing sort of kind of the whole jet thing. But we focus on the major. So Qantas, the most on-time major airline group. But he was right in that Hinterland Aviation was the most on time overall. And they're a regional player based up in Cairns, do a lot of flights around far north Queensland. So we had a chat, and he basically has said as well, because I asked, because it's been a topic of discussion, what's going to happen if Rex goes under? Who will fill in its services? Now, Skytrans has already indicated that it might be able to pick up some routes, and in fact, Skytrans, by the way, is taking over the Qantas Link service to Lord Howe Island. We might touch on that a bit later, but when Qantas Link phases out its Q200s, Skytrans is going to take over that route from Sydney to Lord Howe. But Skytrans has indicated that it might have capacity to pick up some Rex services. Sharp Airlines down in Victoria has said that it could up its capacity from Melbourne to King Island and fill in that gap if Rex left it behind. But Hinterland Aviation as well has basically said that it's kind of got plans in the making, or it is at least very seriously thinking about taking over Rex routes in North Queensland if Rex cannot get out of administration. So he said that there'd be a couple of runs that the airline would be looking at. Couldn't comment on the specifics. But he said, we're trying to be as ready as possible. We're trying to secure additional airframes. So pending how quickly we get them, I'm aiming to be able to start straight away. Hinterland has, at the moment, 12 Cessna Caravans, 2 King Air B200s, also looking to add more Caravans, and it will have, by second quarter of 2026, 2 new Cessna 408 Sky Couriers, which Andrew Clare says are about the right size for servicing these communities. So, as we've noted in the story, it's a bit of a dilemma for the administrator, EY Australia, and for the federal government, because both of them have come out with the argument that that Rex needs to be saved because these are essential regional services. You know, that people need these Rex flights because Rex is the only airline serving these destinations. And if Rex goes under, then there will be no more airlines, which may well be true. But if other airlines then step in and fill the breach, and if other airlines are also kind of waiting for Rex to go under to pounce on these routes, that undermines that argument.
Yeah, because there's an element that they almost like they won't know until the plug is pulled. So only when Rex is liquidated, or if it's liquidated, only when the whole thing falls apart will other airlines be brave enough to move in, knowing that there's spare capacity. But again, it's like the other issue is that even if lots of airlines do pounce on those routes, they are likely to jump on the most profitable routes, and probably the most profitable routes only. And also, some of those smaller airlines, they might be competing for the same ones. So the worry is that if Rex were to go under tomorrow, almost certainly some of those routes will be taken up. But what about the sort of less profitable routes? Well, Who comes in for those?
Well, I believe that Rex is actually subsidised on a fair few of these less profitable routes. There are government contracts for Rex to be doing this, and so presumably some of these airlines would take over these subsidized routes that might not make a profit, but have. Or make a profit on their own, but have these government dollars coming in specifically to keep them going.
But it's not just about necessarily whether they subsidise it. You actually need aircraft to do it. Now, Rex, obviously, we've spoken about how old their fleet is, so it has like an average age of
like 30 years.
Yeah, but some of them are considerably older. The Saab 340Bs, I believe they are, or that particular kind of variant model, you basically can't get that exact one anymore.
Yeah,
so getting
out of production.
So basically getting hold of spare parts and stuff is very, very difficult. And for this reason, a lot of their aircraft have kind of been almost semi-permanently grounded. So the problem is that if another airline comes in, they are going to need aircraft to fly those routes. Do they get some of those old Saabs from Rex? It's very hard to even get them elsewhere. So if you are the administrator, obviously their first priority is for shareholders, or for people that are owed money. The government obviously needs to keep those routes going, but it's almost like nobody necessarily knows what's going to happen. And the worry is there's going to be a period of months or maybe years where some of these routes are not being flown, and that would be an absolute disaster for those kind of local communities that rely on them. What I would say is that it does feel that Rex was a little bit of a ticking time bomb in allowing their fleet to get so old. Really the fleet renewal should have happened 10 years ago, or they should perhaps be looking at getting kind of second-hand aircraft. But it does feel like they were kicking this problem down the road, kicking the can down the road, and now it's all kind of blown up.
Yeah, well, Andrew Clare basically sort of backed up what Alan Milne said, the CEO of Skytrans, about the age of the Saab fleet. And Clare said that he could see this happening from like 5 years ago. He said, you just can't keep operating a discontinued airframe. Regional Australia has always done that. We just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Excuse me. He said, you've got Rex and other regional carriers with aging Saabs that are discontinued. There's Beechcraft 1900s discontinued. They aren't supported anymore. They're old. There's nothing new coming to the markets. And he said, this is where we want to be the leaders with these new Cessna Sky Couriers, which are, they look like really flash sort of whiz-bang aircraft that can handle, they got 19 seats. And he said, and again, speaking before, he said these would be the perfect size for some of these routes in northern Queensland. You could do daily flights, multiple flights in a day. Then the regional communities would have more access to day trips. He also said the other thing is you've got this major issue with engineering shortages in Australia, licensed engineers. If you can't find more engineers, you need to bring in an airframe that has the lowest cost of maintenance. That's where the Sky Courier sits. They're very low maintenance. They're new. They're supported in production. Old aircraft might be cheaper, but or cheaper to purchase, but having them maintained is the real bugbear, especially if you cannot get the parts anymore. And I think this was we also heard about Rex potentially coming a cropper with this lawsuit, a month or a few weeks to a month ago, in the New South Wales courts, where this American company is suing Rex for allegedly stealing these 4 Saabs from a boneyard in Arizona and stripping them for parts. This is all still going through the court, so it's all allegations at the moment.
Yeah.
But the the accusation is that Rex basically bought these Saabs, didn't pay the bills, but took them and stripped them for parts anyway.
And I almost use this analogy every time that I bring it up. But in terms of like how long can you keep an aircraft, it's exactly the same as a car. You can keep it going as long as you want, but the older it gets, the more likely that things are to go wrong, the more you have to maintain it, the more that costs, and the older your car gets, the harder it is to find those replacement parts. Just like with anything. You know, the reason why Rex were not doing fleet renewal is because aircraft are very, very expensive.
They are.
And if you don't necessarily have tons of money behind you, then it becomes difficult to be able to find that money to do it. But, you know, a good example is Qantas. Qantas are going through probably the biggest fleet renewal in their history. They're going to have an almost entirely new fleet of aircraft. They're going to replace pretty much all the 737s. They're also going to bring in lots more, another 24... A350s and or in total A350s and 787s, not including their Project Sunrise. So it's enormous. Now, obviously, that's going to cost them a ton of money. It's costing them a ton of money just as they've come out from COVID, where they've lost money or barely made any money for 2 years. They would rather not be doing that, but they know they have absolutely no choice. So again, it is a failure of kind of forward planning.
And another, by the way, possibly troubling sign for Rex, or we'll have to see, but Pell Air, their aeromedical arm, has been purchased by Toll Aviation, which is, an arm of or owned by Japan Post. There had been sort of rumors floating around or reports that Toll was looking to buy Pell Air. It has now, closed the deal. It barring rejection by Foreign Investment Review Board or whatever, it will buy Pell Air for $47 million, and that will take over those aeromedical aircraft and some really valuable contracts. And according to a release from the administrators, this is going to be used to pay down some of Rex's debt. And so with Pell Air gone, buying Rex might be a less attractive proposition, because you don't get what was from what I understand, a well-performing part of the business.
Yeah, because initially when they went into an administration, you had the regional flights of the Saabs, you had their 737 flights, then you have the aeromedical side of things, and the kind of the FIFO flights as well.
And the training academy.
Exactly. So within this kind of Rex group, as it had grown to be, the worry is, or perhaps the sensible thing is, they sell off the profitable bits, and you are left with the deadwood. And then if you are left with a bunch of old aircraft, who's going to be interested in that? So once they've kind of broken the seal by doing this deal now, this kind of opened the floodgates. Now, obviously, the administrator has to get paid, so I could see why they're doing that. But the worry is that once you disband this group, you make it a lot less attractive proposition.
Yeah, it's a real risk for Rex, and I still hope that Rex can pull through, but we'll have to see what happens.
Okay, welcome back. So, talking about the news, Rex. Jake. We spoke about Rex. What are we going to speak about next?
Well, talking of fleet renewals, old aircraft, and so on, we have farewelled the era of the 717 in Australia. QantasLink over the weekend did its last commercial 717 flight. This was VHYQS, did flight QF 1511 from Sydney to Canberra. That touched down at just after 6 p.m. on Saturday. Got a water cannon salute, the whole 9 yards, and now the 717 has officially been retired from the QantasLink fleet to be replaced with the brand spanking new A220-300s, which are longer range, more efficient, more comfortable, all of these things.
So the 717s, from memory, were the kind of cornerstone of the fleet that helped build Jetstar originally.
Yeah, so it was Impulse. They got Impulse Airways.
Yeah.
Which had, the 717 fleet. They turned Impulse basically into Jetstar, and launched it with these 717s. And, then they've moved these 717s over to QantasLink, and the 717s have been operating the QantasLink flights, and they've been with Qantas for 20 years or so. More than 20 years. And now, Rachel Yangoyan, the CEO of Qantas Link, has said that there's the iconic T-shaped tail has had a long history in the Qantas and Jetstar fleets. She said, from being the aircraft that launched Jetstar's first ever flights in 2004 to serving major cities, regional towns, and the mining sector in the West as part of Qantas Link for more than 20 years, we know our people and customers have loved flying on the 717. As we farewell the 717 in Australia and the end of an era, we are excited about the future of Qantas Link jet flying aboard the A220 aircraft. We're already getting great feedback from customers and crew about the experience. She said, with almost double the range, lower emissions per seat, and a more comfortable in-flight experience, the A220s will allow us to deliver the next generation of flying for our customers and our people. So a lot of
I just think
PR
that's
talk there.
I think that's in poor taste. We're saying goodbye to the 717s, and everyone's got a tear in their eye. But they're like, oh, but this newer model is so much prettier, and it goes so much further. Like, say that another day. Say that is not. It's not appropriate. There's a 717 going off to the boneyard in Victorville, probably.
I believe they have been, or from what I understood in May, they were a lot of them were sold to an overseas carrier. There are now only 2 airlines that are still operating the 717, those being Delta and Hawaiian over in the States.
Great trivia.
In terms of the A220s, at least the ones that Qantas is using in their configuration, they've got 25% more seats, twice the range, 28% lower fuel burn per seat. So they do offer some improvements over the venerable 717s. We also saw we've been seeing now the A220s branching out from Qantas Link capital city flights and heading to places like Launceston and over the weekend as well Coffs Harbour. The first A220 flight for Qantas replacing the 717s from Melbourne to Coffs Harbour touched down on Sunday. And these new planes are allowing Qantas to bring the schedule back up from 2 weekly flights, which it was temporarily reduced to in June, back up to 5. And so they are offering, they're offering Qantas more utility than the aging 717s did. So farewell to the 717. It's been a hell of a ride with the 717. We're looking to the future now with the A220s, and don't forget that Virgin Australia Regional will be getting rid of its old Fokkers soon, and switching to the new E190 E2s. So regional jets having a sort of a renaissance, if you like, in Australia, or a bit of a turnover, and maybe look out for something about that in an upcoming issue of Australian Aviation magazine.
I don't know what you're on about. Right, we've got probably time for one more story, I reckon. What are we going to seem into?
Well, we might want to talk a bit about, it's kind of interesting, a tale of 2 airports.
Go on. Go on.
These sort of came out today. Not entirely comparable stories, but there are sort of parallels. So we've seen Sydney Airport's passenger figures for the third quarter of 2024, and we've seen Perth Airport's full year financial figures. And they paint kind of different pictures. So Sydney Airport is seeing, decent year-on-year growth, but it's still below its pre-pandemic levels. So there were, over the 3 months to September, there were 10.3 million passengers. Now, that's up 3.3% on the same period last year. But in compared to 2019 levels, it's still only a 92.5% recovery. There was a 95.7% recovery for international traffic, so 4 million passengers, and that's up 5.8% on last year. But the big thing still that's holding Sydney Airport back is domestic, because domestic traffic was only 90.5% recovered, which is exactly the same as it was in the June quarter. Like, it has... The domestic recovery is stagnating. Yeah. There were 6.3 million passengers domestically, just a 1.8% improvement on last year. Now, Scott Charlton, the CEO of Sydney Airport, has said that the airport is pleased with the international traffic recovery, despite some headwinds from the supply chain that are affecting airline capacity. But one interesting thing that the airport has said is that this domestic performance is still being impacted by a shift in discretionary business travel. And we can talk a bit more about that once we get back over to Perth. Now, Perth, earlier this year, exceeded its pre-pandemic capacity for the 2023-24 financial year. It resolved this long-standing dispute with Qantas over this move to the Airport Central precinct. But Perth Airport's financial figures have been pretty good. I don't know what Sydney Airport's financials are, but Perth Airport saw a $125.4 million net profit after tax, boost in revenue across all airport operations. That includes aviation, ground transport, property, and retail. The EBITDA for financial year 2024 was $420.8 million, and these figures were both up on the previous financial year. So Perth is seeing a far stronger recovery than Sydney and, quite a few of these other airports on the East Coast. Most of this has been driven by the FIFO market. Regional and FIFO are big out in Perth, and they've sort of come back in a big way. Whereas, over in the East, that's less of a factor. But getting back to, you raised this point earlier today, Adam, when we were discussing this, is that this discretionary business travel thing might be a big part of the key that unlocks why domestic recovery is not as strong. Because, prior to the pandemic, it would have been more common for you to fly to a business meeting, and then fly back between, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, the Golden Triangle. Still some of the most valuable routes in the world. So you would fly down to Melbourne for your meeting, maybe fly down in the morning and fly back in the evening, or spend the night or whatever. Whereas this has become less common post-pandemic as we've seen more people switching to remote meetings like, Zoom. Or Microsoft Teams, if you're into that sort of thing. I don't judge.
I hate Microsoft Teams. I hate it when someone's considered, just do it over Zoom like a decent person.
Yeah.
Not some degenerate with Microsoft Teams. Then it makes your thing crash and you can't download it.
We used Microsoft Teams at my old job. I didn't mind it. It seemed fine. I don't know why. I think I rip Skype, I will say. The demise of Skype has been a sad one.
They really messed up, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were basically, they predicted all of this like 10 years ago. And then suddenly when their big moment comes, the global pandemic shut down of the world, they weren't ready.
Yeah, no, there's a great video, by the way, from Brennan Lee Mulligan, of formerly of College Humor, now of Dropout, where he basically is, the CEO of Skype, and he basically goes on a long rant about how could we have messed this up? How did we lose to Zoom? What the hell is Zoom? We were the verb. We were the verb, and we messed it up. But anyway, so Zoom and Teams and Google Hangouts and whatever, they have kind of replaced this fly down to Melbourne for the day to attend the business meeting, because why would you go to the expense when Zoom is right there? And in Perth, that's probably less of a factor, because people in Perth, I doubt they were flying over to Sydney for business meetings on the reg.
And also, if you're doing some digging in a mine, you can't do that over Zoom.
Not with that attitude.
No. But it's interesting because during COVID and when everybody was really getting into Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all this nonsense, there was an idea that aviation would never get anywhere near back to where it was before. There was an idea that all business meetings would basically stop. Everything would be done over Zoom, and you'd only get on a flight to go on holiday. And so we're now, 2, 3, 4 years on from COVID, or 2, 3 years on from the end of all these lockdown restrictions. How has it panned out? Well, the reality is probably 80% of these business trips are happening, but not 100%. People still like traveling.
And there's still, conferences and things like that. Not every conference is live streamed.
Exactly.
And you want to go in and you want to network and you want to, see the exhibitors, and you want to, make those connections that you can't do over Zoom.
But exactly. And so you had this kind of post-COVID bounce back where everyone was desperate to fly, desperate to travel. They missed it. And now we've settled, if not quite in between, then just not where we were before, because ultimately it still costs a lot of money to fly somewhere, and ultimately if you can do it over Zoom, you will do. And a good example is our sales team, our wider sales team at Momentum Media, which is a company that now owns Australian Aviation. I think they're behind here, or they're down there somewhere. I hope they're working
behind
hard.
That screen.
Yeah, work
just
harder.
Directly behind
work
the
harder,
curtains there.
Make money. And the point is that previously, nearly all of their meetings would have been coffees. They would have been in person. But now the vast majority of their meetings will be Zoom calls, which does make sense. It's easier for everybody to do that. But nonetheless, that is an example of how, travel that would have happened doesn't happen anymore. So the argument is that we were all thinking, when do we get back to 2020? In reality, we might be 10 years away, 20 years ago. We may never quite get there. So the argument is it's almost unfair to judge the industry on where it was in 2019.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been a lot of talk about the domestic recovery, and some airports, like Perth, have exceeded it. But is the recovery worthwhile as a metric anymore?
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like we've got to kind of rethink how this is going to work. One thing that's quite interesting, say, about Project Sunrise, about Qantas' plan to fly the A350-1000 from Sydney to London and New York, is that when they're configuring the plane, it's going to be, I think it's almost half the aircraft is going to be on premium seats. It's going to be first and
very premium heavy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like their strategy is not just to think about how many people we fly, but how much money they spend on those tickets, other ways we can monetize it. So in reality, the whole aviation industry is switching beyond just simple load factors now. And I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see this is going to be almost a change in domestic travel as well. So, yes, I think it in a sense, it's not necessarily that unexpected, but that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, it's a brave new world.
A brave new world. That seems like a good spot to end the show. But usually this is a point when you interrupt me and go, oh, no, there's one more thing.
Someone should write a book about a brave new world. Maybe.
Is this a famous book that I've not read?
Aldous Huxley, yeah. It's not quite. It's a sort of dystopian future novel.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, it poses that 1984 is very sort of harsh and oppressive, whereas the society in Brave New World is very kind of hedonistic and self-obsessed and self-absorbed.
That's where we are now.
Yeah, you might argue, yes, but it's an interesting look at an alternative kind of dystopia that you don't see from the classics like Orwell. So if you're into classic dystopian fiction, but you haven't given Huxley's Brave New World a try, then you're probably not actually into classic dystopian fiction, are you?
Well, it's a dystopian household world where me and you can do some kind of video thing and people watch it, frankly.
Yeah,
right.
It should never have been allowed to reach this state.
No. On that note, we'll probably wrap things up. Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we will be back, God willing, the same time next week. But from now, from us, goodbye.
Goodbye.